Welcome to the Rooted Healing podcast, where we seek to deepen our kinship with the living world and with the great mystery that runs through us. This is a space where stories heal with words that weave us closer to our wild and daring natures, bringing together the expansive minds, topics, and ideas that help us heal, reimagine, and co-create the world we wish to thrive in.
She lives on an island, Long Island, surrounded by the sea. Days in the ocean, nighttime immersed onto the beach.
Christiana Eva Schelfhout is a musician and healing arts practitioner and guide who has had her own deep apprenticeship with chronic mental and physical illness, which has led her on an expansive path of exploration and discovery around the world, drinking from wellsprings of traditional knowledge. She holds thousands of hours of training and experience as a healing arts practitioner and space holder, and much of this time has been spent as a Trauma Informed Yoga Instructor and as a maker of healing songs and sounds.
With me, come with me, oh, I'm begging you to please, please come with me.
She regularly sits in ceremony and spends much of her time immersed in studentship with plant allies, which is how we both met, immersed in ancient ceremonial traditions in Ecuador a couple of years ago now. She is the founder of Animate Healing, and she also works at the prestigious wellness center Shou Sugi Ban in Watermill, New York, where she resides alongside long periods of time that she spends returning to her family home in Portugal. Her musicianship transmutes into her work as a healing arts practitioner and brings me great pleasure to weave in some of her original music into this episode to give you a glimpse of the nurturing sounds and lyrics Christiana brings into this world. I have the privilege of listening to many of her songs yet to be released around many fires and under starry skies, so I hope you enjoy sitting with us in non-linear space and time and listening in to her personal healing journey. And I just want to invite in that sensation of us sitting around the fire together with you.
Chasing pavement, getting swallowed by the moon.
We venture into some scary territory in this conversation, so I hope it finds you in a good way and brings some insight to reflect on in, the most nourishing way it can, even if some things might be triggering depending on where you're coming from. It's well worth listening to the whole thing, even if it is a little longer than our usual episodes, but I just really value the wisdom and knowledge that Christiana shares, and she's been a really important person on my path. So here it is. I hope you enjoy. I'd like to really just take the listeners straight in to understand your journey as to when healing even became a thing upon itself in your life, when healing became an art, and how that steered you towards being a healing arts practitioner in the many forms and facets it is.
Yes, well, like many of us, I think I've been doing my own kind of healing work within myself for my whole life. Just in that, from a young age, learning how to regulate myself and how to be okay with big feelings and how to navigate the murky waters of life. But healing became like the forefront of my attention around the age of 21. So I had been living in London for 2 years after finishing high school. And upon returning to the US, I wasn't in a good way at all. I had just tapered off of 12 or 13 years of pretty heavy psychopharmaceutical use. So at age 7, I was diagnosed with ADHD. So I was put on amphetamines at a young age. And this was following sequences of traumatic events that happened at a young age, which my healthcare practitioners, upon prescribing me these very powerful medications, weren't aware of. So that eventually led to varying states of dysregulation, which led to other symptoms like depression and severe anxiety. So I was then on antidepressants and on anti-anxieties and pills to help me fall asleep. And it was around 20 or 19, 20, I started to slowly come off of these things because there was a knowing, there was an awakening inside of me. And I knew it wasn't right for me, even though I didn't have a lot of context as to why. And then at 20, I was back in the US and I was in a lot of pain, a lot of mental pain, a lot of physical pain. And I attended a yoga class taught by the beautiful Evelyn O'Darty on the east end of Long Island, New York. And the school of yoga she comes from is very integrated. So it's not just asana, it's pranayama, it's philosophy, it's chanting. And I got a view into this world that I didn't know existed. And for one of the first times in my life, I felt a sense of profound safety and understanding. And so from that moment onwards, this is 2012, my life shifted and completely changed. And I set out on a journey to be well in myself. And at the time, I said, I'm going to find happiness. Like that was my internal tagline. Like I just want to be happy, because I hadn't experienced much of that at all in my 20 years. And so shortly after that class, directly after, I started practicing a lot of yoga and began studying and learning about the multifaceted approach to, or the multifaceted reality of this practice, of this lifestyle. And then subsequently moved to an ashram in Virginia, Satchidananda's ashram, where I lived. I was there for only about a month, but I got a really profound taste of what it was like to live in a state of meditation and of calm, and live in a space where the culture was very rich and the teachings were very pure and direct. And from that place onward, basically dedicated the next 10 years of my life, I just turned 30, to studying and traveling to different spiritual communities throughout the world.
And from there, I'd love it if you could steer us towards how you found yourself engaging with ancient ancestral practices like ritual and ceremony and prayer, and this kind of relationship between yoga and transcendence, and then how you've become more gravitated towards earth wisdom and earth focused spirituality and practices.
Yes, absolutely. So for many years, yoga was my path. And I think, like many people who live with a big heart, with sincerity, move into that area of study and of contemplation, you very quickly realize it's an ocean of knowledge, and there are seemingly endless paths to take within this tapestry of tradition, religion. And I meandered along that carpet for a while and was deeply fascinated by all the different threads of knowledge and of wisdom contained within that whole space, and spent quite a bit of time in India and Nepal, living in different ashrams, finding different teachers, engaging with different practices. And it really opened my heart and showed me so much about what was possible, about who I was, and had an extremely positive impact on my life in many ways. However, 3.5, almost 4 years ago now, I had an experience where there was a very big shift in my life with my health. And there was, I was in a moment of real vulnerability in my life. Like several things had happened, several internal processes had left me very vulnerable. And then there were external things which happened, people who had come into my life, events. And due to my personal vulnerability, I was hurt. I experienced a significant trauma. And from that trauma developed a condition, a health condition. And with this health condition, all of the previous tools I'd had available to me, i.e. Yoga and yogic traditions, and allopathic medicine, right? And then even, the various branches of quote unquote alternative medicine, right? Which is what I might have called them back then. They weren't providing me with any kind of relief. And I was in a state of such intense disease in my body that I couldn't get out of bed. I was experiencing extremely high levels of pain, and nobody could help me in the way that I wanted to be helped, right? Which in many ways was wanting to be saved from this pain, from this intensity. And yeah, it was very hard to find any kind of real relief. And so, for brevity, I'm sharing in a very chronological step-by-step manner, but in truth, this was of course like layered and kind of like timelines on top of each other, and it wasn't direct from one moment to the next. But right after I got sick, it was abundantly clear to me the first thing that happened was, I need to eat oysters. I need animal product. And it was coming from a very deep place within me, and I was coming from 20 years of vegetarianism. I became a vegetarian when I was 12 years old, and 6 years of primarily veganism. And things began to shift within my mind, within my psyche. And the relief, the deep kind of relief I was seeking, and the insights I was seeking into my own journey and experience were coming directly from the earth, and were to do with dismantling of power systems, were to do with the wisdom that comes from life cycles of death and rebirth. And from that place, my relationship with yoga started to change. My relationship with myself started to change. And I recognized that in order to be well, like the guidance, the force that was guiding me to be well was a force deeply rooted in the earth, and in ancestral ways. And that my healing was not going to come from ideas of transcendence. I wasn't going to be able to escape this. I could not disassociate from this. And in many ways, the disease in my body was created, I believe, in the first place, from extreme levels of disassociation, which certain practices can exacerbate. Yes. So that was the moment. That was the moment when things became really focused, when my journey became focused on descension, on building a very deep and profound relationship with this reality, with the earth, with the simplicity and magnitude of what it means to be a human being, and really accepting that for what it is, including like the pain. Mm-hmm. And that's when the medicines came into, and ceremony really came in a big way, because I know you asked about that as well. Mm-hmm.
Can you name this chronic condition or pain, just so that if anyone's listening and has a similar experience, they may feel called to continue along this thread.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a bladder infection. So there's an umbrella term called interstitial cystitis. And it's kind of like chronic bladder pain. But what we're really realizing now from different threads of research is that most people who are dealing with chronic bladder pain, or IC, it's actually just an embedded bladder infection, which sometimes does and sometimes does not get pick up on standard urine analysis. So if you've ever had a UTI, urinary tract infection, you'll understand the pain that I am speaking about right now. So it's pretty much, for context, like if you've had a UTI, you understand that pain. I've had a 3.5, almost 4 year UTI at this point.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that pain, and there's different ways and depths to try and articulate it, but it really is like being stabbed. And it's deep, and it's such an intense pain. And I know that you have journeyed into the underworld, and I've even been with you in Ecuador and just, gone for a nighttime pee in the jungle and found you there with a hot water bottle and just in that state, and how accustomed you've become to it. And so can you speak to that part of healing, to sitting with the pain?
Yeah, absolutely. My healing process has been learning to sit with pain and learning how not to run away from the sensations of the body. And I really believe that the gift of this condition has been the gift of presence, because pain is a portal, pain is an ally if you allow it to be so. And there really are, in some ways there are two choices, and you can choose to disassociate, or you can choose to be in relationship with big feelings or big sensations in your body or in your life. And I have found the greatest sense of relief when I'm able to fully engage with the pain, to the point where in some of the most intense moments where I'm, deep in this burning, stabbing, full body sensation, and I have directed my energy through the pain, so not wallowing in it, but through it. I've had moments where it's gone from a level 10 to a 0. And over time, I've learned that the resistance would just breed more resistance in my body. Like the fighting would breed more fighting in my body. And I do also think there is, like with anything, there's a shadow side to engaging with pain, because we can get stuck in it. We can become attached to it. We can associate too deeply with it. We can use it as a crutch. So that all exists as well. And those are things I'm learning all the time about. However, the ability to accept your present reality as something that's happening for you, not against you, even when it's really difficult, can have a miraculous effect on your life, and can teach you presence in a way which almost nothing else can. And there is, a reason a lot of these religions, people will inflict pain on themselves, because it does alter your consciousness in an extremely profound way. And any one of us who are experiencing pain, we have the choice to use that as an ally in that moment.
Yeah, I relate with that, and I'm looking back to my most recent encounter with deep pain, which was, this intense infection I had in my stomach, the layers of salmonella poisoning and whatever else was going on from extremely toxic water exposure in Mexico. I found that afterwards there was just so much less space within myself for other people's crap, for thoughts of my own worthiness, for I can't quite articulate it, but it sort of got rid, maybe the purging, the puking helped with this, but it just seemed to get rid of a lot of stuff that I had been holding into my body that felt like it wasn't all mine, but some of it definitely was. And it almost felt like pushing through that. Maybe pushing is not the right word, surrendering and trusting and coming to the depths of my inner being enabled me to step into a different kind of maturity within myself, a different kind of acceptance and trust. And sense of who I am at the core of it, even if I did feel a bit beaten and battered by the wind, you know. I want to go back a little bit to what you were speaking to just very briefly about yoga, because I think it's really important to just touch upon this. It's such a popularized practice, and I just really honor your personal journey with yoga and the mastery that you have been surrounded by and that you have absorbed wisdom from in your own mastery yourself. And what has this taught you, and what are the patterns that you see that, again, perhaps you can speak to this need collectively for us to ground? And you speaking about your relationship with food and how that so drastically changed, and maybe you can speak to the association of veganism with yoga as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So going back even further, way back, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, we had a collective spiritual culture of reverence for the earth and reverence for cycles of birth and re-death. Birth and re-death and birth and death. That too, I guess. And, many of these societies were matrilineal societies, egalitarian societies, and there was great love and care for the earth. And at some point, right, all layered branches, right, over time, we began to separate from that way of being in relationship with the earth. And we as a collective became interested in leaving the earth. We became enamored with the idea of ascension or transcendence. And this shows up in all of the world's major religions. And there are different, a lot of different thinkers commenting on this, but it's very important to understand that yoga comes from a very deep religious, spiritual tradition. In many ways, it is. And when I'm saying yoga, I'm using it in the context of what a lot of Americans or Europeans might use it as like an exercise with the body, but really it's extremely big and extremely vast, and in many ways inseparable from religion. So this practice, right, this spiritual legacy is rooted in ideas of transcendence. Everything that we are or the ways in which we are engaging with yoga now in like contemporary societies is extremely different than the way it was practice engaged with even a few hundred years ago. And we've lost a lot of context for its original intention and its purpose. For example, like yoga asanas are ways of purifying and moving energy in the body so we can meditate, and through our meditation reach transcendence, reach a state of enlightenment, right? This is generally, right, an upward movement, right? And in a lot of these texts and traditions, and you'll hear threads of, right, a lot of threads of the body and the earth, and then subsequently women being less than. Right? And this is not everywhere, right? Not making generalizations, but this is what you find a lot of in my experience. And so nowadays, we're practicing yoga asana, right? Yogic postures for health and for fitness. It's very important to understand that these practices were never fitness, health-oriented practices. Although there were some strands which were woven in with Ayurveda and different sciences, right? The intention of these practices were for purification, for meditation, and for enlightenment. We find the same with diet and plant-based diets. People weren't eating plant-based foods because they wanted to achieve optimal health and well-being. From a historical, my understanding of the history of plant-based diets has been people eat plant-based because that's all that's available for religious or political purposes, which is cool, which is fine. If your purpose is, again, ascension or transcendence of the human body and of earth. So the thing about yoga is it's extremely effective. It is a wildly powerful and rich tapestry of traditions, but we aren't necessarily engaging with it in line with its original intentions, right? And many of us, especially in the Instagram yogi world and all of this, we're engaging with these practices for health reasons, right? And I guess this really depends on what your definition of health is. If for you, your definition of health is in line with these ideas of transcendence, then awesome, you're probably on the right path. But for me, I realized years ago on my journey, and then there was this process of unraveling, that I actually didn't want to transcend anything. And that these ideas of transcendence were woven in an ugly way with my own trauma. Wanting to get somewhere else, wanting to be somewhere else, wanting to leave this earth behind, wanting to leave my body behind. And the medicine and the purpose of my life was to learn to be deeply in love with myself, with this reality, with this earth, with this body, and come to a new level of love, acceptance. And due to the effectiveness of this science, it no longer felt right to engage with it in the way I was engaging with it, right? And I still have so much reverence and respect for that path. And I'm so grateful for the many, many gifts and tools it has given me, and there'll always be a thread inside of me which teaches and speaks to those lineages and those practices and uses them for myself and for my family, because in just my experience, yoga is master purifier. It can move so much inside the body. So when I teach asana now, I'm certainly not teaching asana for, any kind of aesthetic purposes, or because I believe it's the superior kind of movement practice for your body. And I actually think there's a lot coming out of the functional movement world that is speaking to the fact that yoga actually isn't great on a physiological level, for bones and tissue, as we think it is. And this kind of goes off into a whole other thread about yoga asana and the female body. I've spent the past, 5 years now unraveling chronic tension in my pelvic floor and my lower abdomen, and unlocking this anterior tilt in my pelvis, which was causing an extreme amount of stress on my bladder and on my uterus that, really came from Ashtanga yoga practices. So when I teach, I am teaching for the energetics and with the energetics in mind. And a very simple kind of yoga that is prayerful and acknowledges the power of this science.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the story with, well, it's not a story, it's what happened with the rich Indian king who wanted to bring the yogis down from the mountains and combine their craft of transcendence with a trainer who was training fighters, warriors. And that's kind of not so far back in history, and originally there were only a few asanas that were in the scriptures to really support the meditation practice, which is exactly what you're talking about. And that practice, therefore, of the asanas were really developed, the ones that have become so popularized here, for adolescent men. And you're talking about this pelvic tilt, which, you know, you're always told, pull your pelvis in and up and tuck your navel in and shoulders round, down and back. I personally get quite a lot of pain in my thoracic spine, my mid to upper back, after practicing a vinyasa. And it's, I do think it's from that constant like pulling back and clenching of the muscles around the spine and opening my chest and then tucking my pelvis. How do you, I know I've got a few things that I incorporate into my yoga classes to really honor a female body. How do you in your own practice honor that, especially with realigning your body after so many years of extensive yoga practice?
Yeah, so personally what my yoga practice looks like now is it's very simple hatha yoga that honors fluidity and flow and a lot of intuitive movement. So there's a lot of circular motion. I'm deeply connecting with the breath. I'm letting myself breathe all the way down to my pelvic diaphragm. I'm certainly not tucking my pelvis in. And I'm also not, those cues are given in certain postures, right? Which are really like exercises that have been adopted into the yoga world because they do keep certain parts of the body safe, in my understanding. So, if I need to engage with that kind of tuck in order to, keep the integrity of my spine or something, I just don't really do that anymore. And when I'm engaging with my practice, if I need to like cultivate some heat, I'm going to do that through my breath and through my intention. And I might move a little bit quicker, but I'm not going to push myself into this flow state, which then ultimately becomes unconscious and somewhat disembodied. And I think that's what we see in like the power yoga communities. People are like, wow, yoga is amazing. Like I'm getting really high. And that's what I'm hearing, right? And, they're kind of throwing themselves into these postures that they're not, their bodies, that not necessarily going to benefit their bodies. And they're doing it in a very quick way. And yeah, what that's doing on an energetic level is like pretty intense. It's pretty wild. And, everything we're practicing now, you were referencing is this like very big moment in yoga. So there was like Krishnamacharya, who's like the grandfather of Ashtanga yoga. And then his student Pattabhi Jois, who, coined the term Ashtanga yoga as it's, generally referenced in yoga studios as to describe a very specific school and very specific series of postures. And that's really, that practice has been influenced by, it's either Belgium or Danish, I can't remember, calisthenics and wrestling, Indian wrestling techniques, and I'm sure other influences as well. And so what we are practicing is like a combination of all these different modalities, which were kind of put together, which were, originally designed for young male bodies. And then we've it's journeyed right through Europe, through the US, and different schools have influenced that now. And so we see influence from Pilates, we see influence from like different strength training ideas, like whatever. There's so much in there being called yoga. And I guess what I like to speak to here is the fact that these things aren't necessarily the best thing for your physical body. And that's what people who, work with me, I say this a lot, but it's really important if you're a yoga teacher to remember this, because making claims, and now like this being said, there are yoga therapists and people working in the world of physical therapy who use yoga, who have like a very deep understanding of our bodies, of our physiologies, who are doing great work. But really, a lot of yoga teachers are coming out of their trainings learning, how to facilitate these asana, and, are getting some cultural context for them, and then are doing some anatomy. But it's kind of being advertised as a catch-all for all your health problems, when in many cases it exacerbates health problems, or specifically like, problems with the body. So you have knee issues, you have sciatica. For some people, it really helps them. For some people, they just needed to move and stretch, and wow, like they found the thing that works for them, and it really keeps their body good and strong. And, it's important to honor those people too, because that's super real. But there are also a lot of people who are dedicating themselves very deeply to a yoga practice, not with the intention of, reaching some kind of spiritual state, or really, they're not really on the path, right? But they're using yoga asana as their health and wellness program. And then it's not really giving them the results that they would necessarily hope for, and might actually be causing additional issues, like especially in female bodies with the pelvic tilt, etc.
Yeah, and what's really been present for my process and journey with the practice of yoga in whatever form it's kind of been handed down to me on my path of facilitation and yoga teacher training, whatever, is that I started out with a lot of energy and a lot of need for vinyasa and flow and the heated pace, and more I need to slow down so much that every single movement I can tap and experience my body from within, experience the muscle, experience the sensation, the energetic center. And this slowing down, I kind of keen to move away from yoga. It's like slowing down when we need to heal, this need to slow down in our lives to experience happiness. And you've spoken about in the past how slowing down makes our lives longer. And so can you speak to this need for us all to slow down?
Yeah, absolutely. On this thread, just because we've been in the yoga discussion, feels it's a short story that feels really relevant here. So a few years ago, I did a training in traditional tantric yoga. The teacher who was initiated through his maternal line, and the asana that he teaches is extremely slow. You're staying in each posture for about 2 minutes, and you rest in shavasana in between every posture. And having come from, this kind of vinyasa world, it was difficult for me to relax in it because I wasn't getting this like yoga high. And then it started to become a little bit easier, and become a little bit easier, and become a little bit easier, until I was able to lose my worry or my concern about the time that was passing, or how long it was taking, or how long it was going to take. And I was able to experience a real sense of timelessness, which in many ways I believe is presence, right? Where we are so fully in the moment, which is, that we are able to, just fully feel. And this has been an extremely important part of my own journey, So when you're living with chronic pain or some kind of disease or illness, it often makes you stop. For most of us, we cannot continue to live our lives. If we've been living a fast-paced life, we cannot continue to live life in that same way. And this is a profound gift, because if we slow down enough, we begin to have more time. Time becomes longer. And it's a bit like you're in a car, and if you're driving really fast, you can't really take in the scenery, and you can go 100 miles, 100 years of your life, and it's, well, what did you see? Right? I saw like a bunch of blurry shit. Or you can do that same 100 years, but you can drive slower, and you're still going to get to your destination. But when you arrive, you will have seen the trees and the way the wind moves the grass when it's that perfect golden color. And you will have noticed the animal on the side of the road. And you will have noticed like that beautiful ruin up on the hill. And you will have made the same journey, but yours will be infinitely richer. And that is something I am constantly learning. And it seems like the more I slow down, the more I get done. There's a wonderful quote, and I think it comes from like the US Navy. I heard it on a podcast once, and I loved it so much. And I'm gonna butcher it, so forgive me, but maybe we can put the proper articulation of it in the show notes. But it's something along the lines of, basically, if something is really important, don't rush. The more urgent the situation is, the slower you should go. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's an approach the Navy takes, right? Like if they need to do something meticulously, they slow down all their movements so they don't make any mistakes. And ultimately, I think it's the same for life. If you really take time and you pay attention to each action, and you pay attention to each movement, and you become very conscious of your environment, of what you're doing, of where you're going, you make less mistakes. And when you make less mistakes, you don't have to like relearn the same lesson over and over and over again, or repeat the same pattern over and over and over again. You can take in more information. You can process more information in an easy way. Oh man, with one life, you got one life, you got one life. Oh man, with one life, you got one life, you got one life. Oh man, with one time, you got one time, you got one time to make it right, to make it right, to make it right. Oh, green eyes, lay your guard down. I saw you scraping fingers against mounds of dirt in the driveway, crippled by the drugs sideways. You said you're gonna be some baller, you're not a baller. No baby, looks like you're a baller. And so moving from slowing down, I want to get a little glimpse around how ceremony and reverence for these ancient ancestral traditions, whether that's with plant medicines or simply with each other in circle, how has that shaped your healing journey? How do you incorporate that into your life? I see you as someone with such presence that you've just been talking about, and someone who has this truly embodied way to pray. I would just love to
hear your process, especially because that's how we met at the Ceremonial Healing Center in Ecuador. And we've spent continued time with our teachers, with our friends.
There's something very profound about being in a space where every movement and every action is considered and calculated by the facilitators. And we are both very blessed to be connected with a family that does their work with the utmost integrity and love. And what I saw and felt in those experiences was that, one, the people sitting behind the altar were so aware of everything that was happening in the space. And everything they did, everything they said, every step they took around the space was intentional. And what this made me realize was that everything I said, everything I did, every step I took around the space, and also every thought that I had was shaping my own reality, but also the environment and therefore the reality of everybody else within that space. And then it kind of echoes out when you think about the fact that these ceremonies are prayers, and these prayers are affecting, not only the friends and the families of people in that ceremony, but wider communities as well. And that if I was going to be sitting in these ceremonies, I wanted to sit in them in a good way. And yes, do the deep, beautiful work I needed to do within myself, but also maintain that awareness that I was co-creating a moment in time, as we all are any moment in our lives ever. In the process I've been in with unraveling like power systems, this also became really relevant. And that is something that our teachers will say, they're like, I'm behind this altar. It's kind of like, I don't know if they use this exact language, but it's like they're driving the spaceship, but we're all in it together and no one's above anyone else. People are creating an environment in a ceremonial space for people's healing, for their process, but our willingness to show up and be well in ourselves and do our own work, but still maintaining an awareness of where we are, that feels very important to me, because we're not putting ourselves into the role of a victim or somebody who needs to be healed. They're the expert and I am the patient. It's okay, we're all co-creating an environment where we can all do this deep and important work within ourselves. And so having these examples and having these, insights with these different plant teachers, and really making those connections in ceremony allowed me to take it out into my life in a really good way. And, one of the diagnoses I received as a kid was ADHD. And for many years, I, once I stopped taking the medication and was like, I don't want anything to do with the pharmaceutical industry, I really didn't look at that. I didn't look at that diagnosis because I didn't think it was valid. And I really felt that I still do feel that labels can be more harmful than they are helpful. But a few years ago, really last year specifically, I became very aware of in a medicine ceremony that we did together actually, of how the symptoms that were then diagnosed with this label, how they actually played out in my life, and the effect that was having on my ability to live a quality life and to be of service. And what I found that, what do you do? How do you treat these conditions of the mind that are pretty deep, and that, conventional medicine doesn't really have any answers for, other than, medicating you to get you to behave in a certain way, which is more in line with the status quo, or, more in line with convention. And I realized that what was being modeled for me in ceremony is what I could embody and then bring out into the world. And it's this understanding that life is a ceremony. Every step we take, every word we say, every thought we think, every glass of water we drink, these actions have consequences. And it is our attention and awareness in the moments that we're taking these actions that will produce an effect. And what do we want that effect to be? Do we want one that is in service of life and the sustenance of life on earth, and the sustenance of our own bodies, of our families, of our communities? Or are we doing things unconsciously and taking away, right? Like moving further away from our truth, moving further away from life. So yeah, ceremony is a beautiful place to rewire the mind. And I do feel that, these symptoms that come along with this diagnosis have gotten significantly better over the past few years with the use of these plant medicines. And I pray will continue to as I continue on this journey.
That is in my prayers too. I would love to weave in your music, moving from ceremony, where I have heard you sing, really truly a channel from the plants or the earth herself, and how much you as a musician has been a part of this journey, and the processes that come with having a craft that is an art or that is a form of such raw expression, and how that has woven into your journey of self-reclamation.
Well, I've always been a songwriter since I was tiny. The first song I officially wrote was when I was 7 years old, and it's in a rainbow notebook, and it's about the life cycle of grass. So
standard Christiana.
So that's where it started. But I think it started earlier than that. I listened to a lot of classical music, and I remember kind of making up words and playing in my mind. And it started with, changing lyrics to songs and things, and then just songs started coming. But this was also something that I didn't feel a lot of confidence around. It was kind of hidden behind closed doors, but also hidden in my mind. It wasn't something I really shared. And it took years and years, well, let's see how many years, something like 15, 16 years of conscious, right, songwriting before it became something I had any confidence in, enough confidence to share. And mind you, I had written this hundreds of songs. It was the part of my brain is always in this mode of creation. So around the same time that I found yoga, I had a song picked up for a film. And it was this really big confirmation that oh, wow, maybe this is somewhat good. And maybe I can do this. And that was it. I was wow, maybe I could actually be a musician. Maybe I could actually be a singer. And prior to this, I had been acting all through high school and some college and university. And I had been told, or it had been reflected back to me enough times, that I was not a singer. And I felt so self-conscious of my voice. And I had just kind of accepted that I would never be a singer. But I was oh, maybe I can be a songwriter. Maybe I can write songs for singers. Even though I love singing, in the privacy of my home. So around this time, the music, that song got picked up and they were using my voice in it. It was a demo I had made. And they're oh no, we'll use the demo and we love it. And I was wow, amazing. Okay, great. And so I started to kind of take my songwriting a little bit more seriously and started playing open mics and, dabbled with recording things and had met some people in subsequent years that I would gig with, and really started exploring my way into musicianship, and then went with a laser focus into it. And started, I did an apprenticeship in sound engineering and production, and started producing my own work. And that was my primary focus. And actually, I never intended on teaching yoga or doing anything kind of in the world of healing arts. It was really just something I wanted to do to support my health and well-being, and thought, I'll teach a class here and there to support a career in music, which is not what ended up happening. It ended up being in many ways the reverse. So in this time, my confidence started to build, and a lot of it is because of yoga and because of my exposure to things like mantras and different singing traditions from all over the world. I realized in my early 20s, it was a big epiphany that good music didn't have to be pretty. It didn't have to be beautiful. Voices didn't have to sound a certain kind of way. And like, especially listening to bhajans, these like very authentic recordings of people chanting in temples, which is like many of them very raw and very real and absolutely stunning. They move so much in me and felt so authentic that I thought, well, fuck it, I can do whatever I want and it doesn't really matter. So, this started to happen, this started to unravel, and this started to grow. And then, I was trying to play gigs and to do this thing, but it never felt good to me because I'm very sensitive, and a lot of the places I was playing I didn't feel comfortable in. So that was, kind of like encapsulates my early 20s. But a few years ago, 4 years ago, I released an EP, totally self-produced EP, self-recorded everything. And it was right after that I got sick. And so it was this big moment for me with these big desires and these big dreams of taking that piece of art and using it as a catalyst to help me play shows and get my name out there a little bit more. And, my dream was for it to lead to collaborations, because that's what I've really prayed for, is the opportunity to collaborate with producers and people in the industry who can take these songs kind of to the next level with additional production. And instead, I found myself in the throes of illness, and none of that seemed even mildly appealing or important to me anymore. And there was a very big death process that happened, a very big shedding away of my identity. And very luckily, around that time, actually, funnily enough, I remember like saying a prayer or being like speaking to someone in a way where things were flowing and I felt really good in my expression. And I said, I just want to play, I don't want to play shows. I don't want to ever go to a bar again. I just want to play in front of campfires all over the world. And it happened, man. That's what ended up happening, because, where did I go? All these places I went to seek help and guidance for ending this, cycle of suffering, physical suffering. I was, in front of a lot of ceremonial fires, in front of a lot of bonfires, in front of a lot of, in a lot of circles, right, where people are sitting together. And that's where I really was able to, I feel, reach like this very full understanding of what my relationship with music and song is. And there is no place I prefer to sing than in a ceremony. And that is where I feel most at home and most free, and like I am most able to express the full potential of of this gift.
I'm right there with you. It's been a total unraveling in the most beautiful way of a professional training in musical theatre, to be journeying into the depths of healing and exploration and cross-cultural wisdom exchange, and then to be in ceremony and to sing and just to open your mouth and sing without this pre-rehearsed and technical constraint, which is obviously, it's wonderful to have strengthened that in all its ways. And I still love belting out a, Broadway baby tune or something. But yeah, and you've been a big teacher for me for that, to hear you open up so rawly in those spaces gave me permission to explore my voice in a way that I didn't know was in the capacity of how humans sing. And that kind of reaching broader and listening to songs that are sung in a sacred capacity has been a huge part of that. Definitely want to weave your music into this episode. So being in circle, going from music and singing and being in circle, can you speak to the power of community when it comes to healing, but also the paradox where there's also that deep need for privacy and safety as well, and finding the right people to have around you, creating that safety in your body to heal? If you can speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as many of us know and is spoken about a lot in today's healing culture, we absolutely need people. Like we have evolved to be social. We are socially oriented animals. I'm not sure what the right term is, right? But we co-regulate with each other is what I'm trying to say. However, we are living in a world with varying states of dysregulation, right, on a nervous system level. And our family members or the people we have around us aren't necessarily the people who are going to help us regulate or find ease in our body, especially when we're in the throes of a deep healing journey. And so many of us are called to kind of crawl to the back of the cave, which is what our very, very, very deep ancestors would do, right? These animals who would find the deepest, darkest spot to rest in and to heal in privacy. And these moments can feel very difficult if you, again, like we were speaking with pain, if you resist them. Because there is this natural and innate longing for connection. However, there is a profound gift present in these moments of privacy. Because with privacy, you can journey within your own body, within your own psyche, and to other places. And this is work you cannot necessarily do if you are tending to the needs and the day-to-day lives of community members. So for me, with this journey with my bladder, very few people knew what I was experiencing for many reasons. One of them being because I didn't want a network of people who weren't intimately connected with me projecting their feelings or opinions on my life. It's why I didn't post about it on Instagram or, was just mindful who I told. And even sometimes, I didn't tell many people. I would tell someone, I'd be like, oh man, I shouldn't have said that, because, when you tell someone, for me at least, I receive a reading back, a reflection back. And sometimes I would feel like that reflection just wasn't helpful. It wasn't good. And so, moving deeper into this space, I really became very careful with who I shared this with. Also because I don't think being viewed, even if people's, their thoughts are of care and of love, for me, being viewed as a victim is not an energy I want being projected towards me personally. So being very mindful that the people I told, what would come back from them would be deeply nourishing for me. And this helped me immensely. And what I think is relevant maybe to some people listening here is, if you're struggling right now, you could be on a healing journey, you could be dealing with pain, or you could just be feeling really cut off from community and like you don't have a lot of people around you, you don't have a lot of people to relate to. If your prayer is to have those people around you, if your prayer is for community, keep praying. Know that what you want is waiting for you, what you seek is seeking you to, and that the time will come when you are in the day-to-day flow of life with people you care about and love. That time is coming for you. But in the meantime, take advantage. Take advantage of the nights you have alone in your bed. Take advantage of the mornings you have, quietly in your space. And if you're living with people who you don't relate to and you're feeling loneliness even in that situation, find your kin in the more than human world. Go outside, find your community in nature, find your community in your land, find your community in your dreams, find your community in your meditations. Envision what that reality is like, because one day you will not have the time to sit and lay with your belly on the earth. One day you won't have time to, one day you won't be sleeping alone in your bed. You won't be sipping your morning coffee by yourself. So take advantage of this moment. Connect with the more than human reality, more than human world, and know that soon this too will be over.
It all resonates so deeply, and it's really striking a chord. We've spoken about this before, but something's really striking a chord this time around my personal process. And I do have a lot of resistance speaking it even into this space. And it's crazy because I wrote a poem about it that's already kind of went a little bit viral on Facebook. But anyway, I had cancer. And when I had an operation, I had this like final diagnosis, and this particular 2-week, very crazy window of just being lurched into the unknown, where I didn't really know whether I had more cancer, whether I was going to be put on chemotherapy. And my absolute instant innate reaction was total privacy. I didn't want anyone to know. I knew, especially with that word, right, that C word, that it's like immediate, that victim projection that you're talking about. And I didn't want that. I needed strength. I needed vision and optimism and fun and lightness around me. And I was compensating with making jokes all the time, with maybe some avoidant behavior. Maybe some of this was simply avoidant behavior, but I got in such a terrible fight with my mum because she wanted to tell everyone. She wanted to tell the bus driver. She wanted to tell the receptionist. She wanted to tell everyone in my family. And we were in conflict about this. And in hindsight, I could see that she needed that support. She needed to be seen and held as a mother of a young daughter, age 20, who'd been diagnosed with cancer. She needed that. But I needed that privacy, and I needed to, put some walls up. And just hearing you talk about the animal going back to the cave, to the back of the cave, is like, oh, wow, yeah, that was more innate perhaps than I've given credit to, because over time, and I've worked a lot with young people with cancer, and we did this awareness video at Christmas, and we were talking about tips, for people with cancer over Christmas. And I said, I was diagnosed right after Christmas time, and the mistake I made was not wanting to tell anyone, whereas I think it's really important to tell people because they love you and they want to support you, and there's power in that message. And it felt really good as like a Christmas message, like allow your family to support you, but it's just, it's coming through right now of, oh wow, yeah, okay, that was also an innate, justifiable worthy response, that need for the privacy.
Yeah, both are totally valid. And I think for many of us, or just for me at least, that if I cannot receive the quality of care that I know I need and deserve from the people around me, I would rather cultivate that within myself rather than having to manage an unhelpful response from somebody else. That's just me. Because it can be really tiring, you know, if anyone sat there when you share a little bit about yourself and someone starts giving loads of unsolicited advice, or, you know, just starts behaving in a way that it just isn't what you need. You know, it can be easier just to, you know, just float on over that subject and, find the resources in yourself.
Another thing that I've noticed in that interaction with people is a lot of people's need for acute detail accounts. And I really recognize in myself like total resistance. It's like, I don't want to tell you exactly how it got discovered and da 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 da. But I know that curiosity comes from people's real concern for their own health. It's like, I want to watch out for those symptoms. But I do think there's a part in the human psyche that just wants the gruesome facts.
How does it feel to have the ability to self-heal? Oh, elation, all the lifetimes right now on this occasion, and reality's beginning to reveal that what you want is waiting for you, and what you seek is seeking you too. I've been through the worst stages, now I'm celebrating, I'm rolled in sugar like I was born in a candy store. Then the war on society took the best of me, now I'm totally free. Oh sisters, I adore everything you stand for. The sweetness of life is always double the strife. Open your hands for more.
I think as a final thing I'd like to cover with you, especially because it's been such a recent thing that you have influenced me very greatly on, is food and nourishment when it comes to healing. And you've already touched upon your transition from veganism or vegetarianism to eating ancestral foods again. And I have just spent 10 days with you in Portugal, where I really, for the first time, and also a very, very long time, I can't really track how many years it's been, have started eating meats and cheeses and really trying to reprogram my mind. And I'll share a quick story about how when I was sat in ceremony in Ecuador, and you were there as well, and we'd been having these conversations, and I was getting super triggered. You know, there's so many different pieces of information, and there are people out there, especially with talking about thyroid conditions, which is something I'm in this healing realm with, is that you should be vegan or like do this autoimmune diet. And it was never really working with me. I always felt really depleted, and I would just lose weight more and more easily. And and my nervous system has just been in overdrive. And I think this is, whether you have a thyroid condition or not, I just recognize so many people's nervous systems in overdrive, like just getting used to living with a constant state of perpetual anxiety. I was in a ceremony with ayahuasca, and she showed me in a very deep, but also in this kind of way she has with me, this kind of Rafiki, squash banana, oop banana, grandmotherly, humorous way of just really trying to help me see and feel that it is okay to eat meat, and that is the way that I will heal and nourish my body, my nervous system, my hippocampus, and all these different downloads coming in their different capacities. And so can you speak to this as someone who has been, a few steps ahead and a real guide for me?
Yeah, of course, love. So circling all the way back to speaking of, yoga and these ideas of ascension, and there's a reason why plant-based diets are recommended in these practices, because they assist with these themes of transcendence and of leaving the body. But I believe, and this belief is supported by extensive research from people like Weston A. Price, who has some incredible literature on this. In order to support life, we need animal foods in our diet. And in this moment, I won't go into the science behind it, but it exists, and there is ample, very digestible and deep research for people to explore if that's where they want to go. Nutrition and Physical Degradation, I believe the name of the book is by Weston A. Price, is a great place to start. So if plant foods, eating purely plant diets can bring us up and out of our bodies, I believe animal foods, ancestral foods, have the ability to bring us deep down into our bodies. And it brings us into connection with the earth, with those who have come before us, and with cycles of life and death. And spoke to a little bit before this very big process of dismantling power systems in my own journey, in my own life. And I realized in this moment, these moments of transition, that I had a hierarchy of life. I was placing animals above plants, as animals being more conscious, more alive than plants were. And after really diving in to the energetics and esoteric realms of healing with plants, with entheogens, but also with just all plants, with nature, I realized that this is false. That life is life is life. And as humans, I believe, our objective should be to learn to eat, one, to deeply nourish our physiology, which is most accessible through animal products, through all these fat-soluble vitamins and the ample nutrition that is present in animal foods, and to eat in a way that is going to support our ecosystems. And this is entirely possible through regenerative farming, which includes the use of animals in these systems. So bringing these foods back for me, coming back to my personal journey, was revolutionary for many reasons. One, because I just felt so much better. My mood was more stable. Any symptoms associated with my menstrual cycle, pain, these, big swings, hormones diminished. I was experiencing less pain from the bladder condition. I was just feeling stronger. My skin looked better. I didn't have dark circles underneath my eyes anymore. My teeth felt better. I mean, everything got better. And keep in mind, I was eating what I considered, and I think what most people in the vegan vegetarian world would consider to be a good diet, right? But the time came, and what was really clear was that my body was telling me what I needed. And how this manifested at first was, I finished eating meat when I was 8 years old, so I didn't even remember what meat tasted like. So it was impossible for me to really crave it. But what happened was I started to experience these very intense symptoms in my mouth where my teeth were aching, like all of my teeth were, my gums were aching, and I had this very intense desire to bite down on something. So I would bite down on by like chewing gum, or I'd bite down on a towel or something, and it wouldn't relieve the symptoms at all. And this would happen, and it would drive me a little crazy. I just like couldn't understand what was happening. This very intense, very physical sensation. And the first time I ate meat, which was in ceremony, it was beef, and the particular lineage of ceremony that we've sat in with San Pedro. In the final rounds, they serve different foods that symbolize different parts of our lineage and creation, and one of those foods is meat, is beef. And I bit into this beef, and wow, I realized what that feeling was. That feeling was my body telling me that I needed meat. And that had been happening for 1.5 years prior to that moment. And yeah, from that it started slowly. If anyone's listening to this and considering transitioning out of a plant-based diet, I transitioned slowly incorporating more animal products into my diet. But now it's like fully integrated into my life, and I have never felt as strong and vital and healthy as I do in this moment.
I'm really resonating, even though I have a shorter time frame since I'm in this transition. But the last few cycles I've had, moon cycles, I've had no pain, pretty much. Maybe some mild symptoms. My mood's been, so much more consistent. My hair has grown in a much more stronger way, and there's lots of things I can immediately say have changed and shifted. And I was eating venison yesterday, which I hear myself saying, I'm like, oh, Ronnie, not everyone has like this privilege where they can access venison, but just to bite into such amazing meat that is from this beautiful wild animal in the Scottish Highlands. I could feel how much my body was like, thank you for your life, thank you for nourishing me. And it was like, oh wow, my jaw is feeling very activated just thinking about it. And I was getting that pain as well. I couldn't understand what it was, but it was like a deep, sharp pain at the back of my jaw. And I was particularly getting it when my mum and Chris would cook a roast chicken or turkey or something. Wow. And I always thought it was the wine. I thought, oh, wine's giving me this strange reaction, because that kind of came with it, right? The wine and the roast. And I'm realizing now, hearing you talk about that, oh no, that was my body like, eat the meat. Wow. Oh. And I know how triggering this kind of conversation can be when you're a proud vegan, because I had to go through quite a big ego identity makeshift makeover, because so much of that was a part of my identity now, and I had fought to have reverence for that choice, especially around certain family members who didn't understand about being vegan or vegetarian. And then it's just sort of like that feeling of wrapping the tail between my legs, like, and returning to the wisdom of my previous generation, my parents, is a process in itself.
Yeah.
I must say that they've been very kind. I asked when I announced it to my mum, please, can you keep the teasing down? Because it was hard. They were saying to me, oh, well, you better get this phase out of the way before you're thinking about pregnancy. And I was so triggered. I was like, you don't know nothing about my body. They were right.
Yep.
And it also feels so good, when I've done this and really focused on eating these foods, I'm like, oh wow, my boobs feel really full and lovely, and I feel this grounding, and my metabolism is higher. And I just love it, the way that Jessica
Ash, I believe.
Jessica Ash says, she was putting some post about libido actually, and different foods that really support it, and but in underneath in the caption she said, a healthy woman is hungry, happy, and horny. And it really like energetically stuck with me, this feeling, yeah, okay, it's good to be hungry, it's good to be happy and have a neutralized mood. Maybe that's, happy is not the right label for that, but you know, to what I see is to be able to feel joy in the body and not be anxious, to be in pleasure, and horny, you know, that healthy fertility of being a woman, a cyclical being. It's kind of turned into my affirmation. I am hungry, happy, and horny. Stomping around the house.
I love it. As you should be. Wow. Yeah, it's so beautiful. And I think especially for myself and for many others, especially like young women of our generation, really a lot of us came into this plant-based eating, you know, in our early 20s. Now a lot of us want to have children. And the reality is, if you're speaking to midwives, or birth workers, birth keepers, people on the front line of humanity in many ways, we are seeing startling instances of children being born with signs of very serious malnutrition, and it's showing up in a variety of different ways. And the numbers of children developing chronic conditions which are linked to malnutrition are, I think it's like, I'm not going to throw out the statistic, but it's very high. It's very, very high. Rochelle Garcia Saliga, a teacher of mine, teaches about this a lot. And it's really important information, because we cannot idealize our way out of biological reality. We can't, you know, just like think this is a nice way to live, and then cherry pick science in order to match our belief systems and expect it not to have a consequence. And it is having a consequence, and they are multi-generational consequences. So maybe it's not affecting you badly, maybe it didn't affect your child, but when you're looking down the line at multi-generational effects of nutrient depletion or deficiencies, it starts to show up. It starts to show up in the way our bones are structured and formed. It shows up specifically in like our teeth and our palate and a variety of other ways. And so it's important stuff, especially for us right now, or for anybody who wants to bring children onto this world right now. It's a big responsibility. And please consider all of this information before choosing to take that step.
Where would you send people to as the first point of reference?
So if you want information on like multi-generational effects of nutritional deficiencies, you can look at Weston A. Price. I would go right to his literature rather than the foundation, although the foundation has some good some good content on there as well. But Nutrition and Physical Degradation, I hope I'm saying the name of that title right. You can go specifically on that line and follow Rochelle Garcia Saliga of Innate Traditions on Instagram. She recently did a great webinar on this exact topic with Carly Ray, who is a female body worker and who, again, is someone like on the front lines of humanity, because she's seeing what's happening to mothers and to babies on level of the tissue, which is really interesting. You can also go to Katya Nova, is a beautiful woman who was a vegan, who raised her children vegan, and then turned to ancestral diets, specifically like pro-metabolic and ancestral kind of ways of eating, like Weston A. Price influenced ways of eating, because the teeth of her children started falling out of their mouth because they were so nutrient deficient, even though she was, feeding them the perfect smoothie bowl. greens every day kind of ideal vegan diet. And she recently put out a whole, I don't even know what you'd call it, collection of interviews called Confessions of a Well-Nourished Woman. And so that has like 50 different interviews with leaders in the world of nutrition and of motherhood. And I would highly recommend that. And then also Kimber Malden, she's my personal nutritionist and health coach, and I owe a lot of wisdom and just a lot of my healing in the past few months I credit to her presence and her guidance in my life.
Thank you. And we spoke more briefly about kind of diving into those earlier earth wisdom traditions, but I just want to reference The Great Cosmic Mother, this fantastic book that you recommended to me many years ago, and has become such an incredible book of reference for me, and I know it is for you too. And it's by Barbara Moore and Monica Shou. And so for anyone wanting to read a radical take into her story, the earliest ways of existence, which we can look at a lot of evidence to suggest that 95% of the human history was in peaceful, matriarchal, or egalitarian, much of the same thing, forms. In fact, can you quickly speak to the difference between patriarchy and matriarchy?
So patriarchies are generally understood as top-down power structures with men dominating women. It can also be described as the system by which name, goods, wealth is transferred from father to son, so down the male line. Like we generally, in almost all places in the world, take our father's name. So that can also be described as patriarchy. And up until not so long ago, women couldn't own property. We couldn't have goods in our name. Everything was through the father's line. So the father controlled the material wealth, etc. Matriarchy is not the inverse of patriarchy. Matriarchy is not a power structure. Matriarchy is a mother-centered society. So you have women and mothers at the center who lead and care for their community with matriarchal values, which are care and nourishment and love. Because if women in a small community, say, historically our tribes, communities, clans were generally, like 30 to 50 people, so if there was like a few very old women, almost everybody in that community would either be a daughter or a son of that woman. So, or grandson or great grandson, etc. Right? They would be directly from her line. So she would care for the community as a mother would care for her children. So matriarchy can also be, we can use the word egalitarianism, right? Or egalitarian societies where everyone is equal. From my personal belief and understanding, they are much of the same thing. And it really is a society where the values of the mother are held in the center. And it's also a society that venerates and respects and loves men. The fullness and the brightness of the masculine form. And I believe in these societies, there are places where all genders can express themselves in their fullest potential. Being deeply nourished by the feminine.
Oh, I feel like there's so many more conversations I want to bring you onto this podcast for. And I'm very grateful for the time you've given to sit and go through this process, the depths of healing. And so thank you so much. And I'd love to do this again sometime. And I'll be linking all the references and linking to your Animate Healing and your music too, and weaving in some of your beautiful music into this episode. And just all around loving you in every single way. So thank you.
With me, I'm begging you to please
come with me. Free. Oh, oh, we are free. I don't wanna be.
Thank you for being here with the Rooted Healing community. You can head over to our Patreon page to gain access to a 50% discount to work with Christiana one-on-one at patreon.com/rootedhealing, which I really recommend. She's incredible. We have a few spaces left at our summer solstice rebirth gathering next month in Dorset, England, and I'd like to offer our podcast listeners, you, an exclusive 20% discount if you book to join us before the 11th of June. Head to rootedhealing.org/summer solstice to learn more and book your spot. All references and links are in the show notes, and if you're enjoying the show, please rate and review us to help us be discovered by more people tapping into these conversations. I'm your host, Veronica Stanwell. Thank you for being here and thank you for listening.